Welcome, everybody. My name is Peter Sweatman. I'm an enterprise professor at the University of Melbourne. I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. It's 8:30 in the morning here, and it's on June 16, Tuesday, June 16. Welcome to everyone on the call from North America and from all around Australia. This is the first of our Max web panels, live and international. So we're looking forward to it. We're excited. It's the first of a series brought to you by ITS Australia, where I'm sitting right now in ITS Australia's offices, and the University of Melbourne. We called the series Pieces of the New Normal. Prior to the virus, we thought mobility was transforming, and we were all excited about that. And some of us have been working on that for a few years now with automation, connectivity, and more. And then we got what some would call a black swan disruption from the virus. And you know, does that mean certain things can now happen that couldn't happen before, can slip through the cracks? Or does it also mean that certain things definitely won't happen? So that's the kind of conversation we want to have today with our great panel. I just want to say something about MAX, the Michigan-Australia exchange. We set that up about 18 months ago. Signatories are the Governor of Michigan and the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, in his role as Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regions and Cities. And it's a unique footprint for collaboration. We're interested in innovation in mobility systems in particular, global best practice, where are the gaps. We'd already done a few events and identified what we call Connected and Automated Vehicle 2.0, CAV 2.0 ecosystem is really kind of our sweet spot in terms of looking for advances and sort of socializing those advances as widely as we can. In other words, by 2.0 we mean beyond privately owned cars into mobility systems with automation and connectivity for people and freight. So that's pretty much Max. We've done reciprocal events in Melbourne and in Detroit, and through those events we've identified a particular theme on impactful roles for public agencies. So that's Max. You can find out a bit more, and we do have some written materials which we will refer you to later, and there'll be some more after this event today. I want to recognize our producers, if you like, in two places, Susan Proctor in Michigan and Susan Harris here with ITS Australia have really put this together from the two sides of the pond. Our format and theme today, I guess I see this as like a plenary session at a major conference. Remember those? We used to go to those all the time, and now we don't. Well, let's hope we can get something happening in the not too distant future. But basically, we're going to have opening remarks from the panel, and then we're going to have a discussion, as you would expect. You, the audience, can write in comments and questions, and we encourage that. We'd love to see that. And we will kind of curate those in real time and include those in our conversation. And at the end of the day, after this exchange, we will prepare some notes on what did get exchanged today in the way of a write-up, and that will be available to all of you. So having said that, I want to get to the panel, and this is the really the focus of our session. So here we are sitting on stage at a conference. Last one I was at was in Halifax, Canada. So it was a big room. So it's on my right and your left, I want to introduce Carla Balo, who heads up the Center for Automotive Research in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sitting next to her is Jivak Badvi from Sunderberg Farrar, a great design company beyond vehicles, and I'm sure he'll explain that to you. He's from Walled Lake, Michigan. And on my left and your right, Chen Kai from Data 61 in Sydney. Sorry, Chen. So having said that, let's have some opening remarks from the panelists. So first of all, I'm going to turn to Carla Balo, and I hope that each in turn will introduce themselves, their companies, and maybe their own unique take on the theme for today, which is really the impact of the virus on innovation in mobility. So Carla Balo, over to you.
Well, thank you, Peter. And before I get started on my introduction, my last conference was in Honolulu. So that was a good way to end the conference swing of things. I'm at the Center for Automotive Research. We are a nonprofit automotive think tank. We do research to promote sustainability of the automotive and mobility industry. So that's our whole mission. And we have been deeply studying everything that's happening with COVID, clearly. And before we talk so much about the future, let me tell you what actually happened to the industry, which was pretty dramatic. When we look at the sales decline, when we had originally predicted in 2020 about a 17.5 million SAR, and we saw in the last month about a 12.2 million, better than we thought. There were not people who were in the 11s. It's pretty drastic. It's a 22.5% drop. And when we look at that by segment, it's kind of interesting. Pickup trucks were down, and this is in the US market, about 7.5%. So pickup trucks were still pretty hot. Electrified vehicles were second. They were only about 18% down. And then CUVs, SUVs were around the 22%, and then the rest were quite a bit below that. So we continue to see the trend of people shifting to pickups and CUVs and SUVs. But the electrified is quite interesting too, that we didn't see the drop despite, fuel prices being exceptionally low. So that's the headwind that we're facing. And now we're coming back into production. And the automakers are gradually ramping back up. There are some that are already up to 3 shifts per day, especially pickup trucks. We have short supply of certain vehicles. We have too much supply of others. So trying to balance out that inventory in the dealers is really, really important. And there are 3 critical elements. The first is we need to have a healthy workforce. So all the protocols that are being put into the factories are very important. We need to have a healthy supply, meaning global supply of parts and components coming into those manufacturing plants has to be sustainable. And there's great risk right now when we see what's happening, especially with COVID-19 in Mexico and some other regions. And thirdly, we have to have healthy demand. The consumer needs to want to buy a car again. Now, the good news is we're seeing globally that people are choosing to purchase cars again because they're a little bit afraid of public transit, which Chen will talk about, I'm sure. We don't know how long lasting that is. And quite frankly, a lot of the products that they're purchasing, the dealers tell me they can't keep cars in their lot that are $10,000 or less. So that means they're not buying new cars, they're buying used cars. So, and that's going to create a plethora of other problems we were trying to solve, like congestion and road rage and probably even more accidents. So we're going to go the other way unless we handle this properly. So on that, kind of note, I'll talk about electrification. I'll talk about smart mobility, but I think we'll do that later in the questions and answers. But I just wanted to tee up, this is where we are today.
Well, thank you, Carla. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, your view of the, of course, of what's happening in the auto industry is second to none. So we appreciate that. Let's turn to our second panelist, Jivak Bhagve.
Hey,
Jivak.
thank you, Peter, again. My name is Jivak. I am an industrial designer, now been in this profession for last 24 years, born and brought up in India, started my career with Tata Motors, eventually came here to GM Design Studio, and now I'm with Sunberg Farrar. We are a quintessential industrial design studio. We are the second longest one standing in the nation, 86 years as such. So what do? We design products from both the functional aspect and also from the emotional aspect. About understanding the experiential part of it and then trying to come back to the roots of the product as such. So we service mobility industry, medical product industry, houseware industries. It might be a lawnmower, a toaster, it might be a car, it might be a public park bench. The product doesn't literally matter. It's understanding what would be the needs, the wants, the desires of people right now and also in the future. That's what a studio tries to understand, always understanding what might the future would be expecting from us. So that's what the design studio does. Couple of takes on like right now where we are or what can be the immediate future as we go forward from that. The main thing is people try to disintegrate the entire product system into just a product or something else. No, it's never just a product. It's the hardware part of it, of any product. And the product can be a train, the product can be the mouse, or the product can be a coffee cup also. The product is a big part of it. Joined at the hip is the graphical user interface, no matter whatever it is. It might be an parking ticket vending machine or any other thing too. Then the software part of it, the digitization behind the curtain as such. The last part is the service part of it, which suddenly we are trying to see a little bit of a great uptick or a bigger uptick in this evolving immediately new domain, new kind of an elements of the normal as such. And we can talk more about those things too, but there are three things where the future can or it seems to be heading. The first is we have to understand, we have to literally understand now the end user and the users, not just a single user, it's a multi-user constituency always. They are now going to be really hypercritical on understanding and getting the value for their hard-earned cash. So it's not going to be that easy to create that distinction, that uniqueness, the compelling element that you want in your product. And that's why it goes to the second element of the economies, or the way you, I should say economies, the market chunks as such. Those might be a little bit more granular. Access and completely vast market might be a little bit different way, but now to access in a smaller kind of zones might be the second one that's coming up pretty fast. And the third one is no matter what, the value systems that companies are going to put forward would be starkly polarizing. What I love, Chen might hate. What Peter will literally love and pay top dollars for it, Susan might not want it, and that's completely okay. To each her own. But how to understand and break down the elements of what people really want to do and how they want to use or misuse it sometimes, and then putting that into the way you can create that from your company as such. So those can be the first, I would say, startup statements from my side. I'm looking forward to a discussion, a great discussion.
All right, thank you, Jivak. Thank you. You guys are doing a great job keeping this on track. We're going to go over to Sydney now on the East Coast here in Australia. And Chen Kai is up there at CSIRO's Data 61. Chen?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. My name is Chen Tai. I'm leading the Transport Analytics Group in CSIRO's Data 61. About a little bit of background, CSIRO is Australia's national scientific research body, and Data 61 is a dedicated business unit to promote research and industrial application in data science in CSIRO. So we have in about in CSIRO in total 6,000 employees, and we are across about 26 sites in Australia, and we have a few overseas sites around the world, including in America. So at our research group, we are specialized in bridging data science with transportation science, so we can promote the adoption of new technologies, data science, and insights in the transport industry. We are in the unnerving time because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But this also creates opportunity for us to look into what is the impact of this pandemic in our critical mass transit system, which is the backbone for our urban mobility and economic productivity. So we are in a fortunate place to be commissioned with the assistance from local government agencies to investigate how we can combine transport modeling at a very granular level, together with detailed infectious disease modeling to simulate how the pathogen, like COVID-19, can spread in the public transport networks at different times and locations. This sort of granularity in modeling can reveal how infection could possibly spread in public transport networks and from travelers to traveler and from location to other locations. And so based on that, we can investigate if we adopt preventive measures, like we use disinfection to clean the interior of the public transport vehicles, we enforce social distancing in the vehicle, which we are currently doing in Sydney's transport networks. We can also ask for hand sanitizer to be used and mask wearings for the travelers. So in combination of those preventive measures, we can test how effective of those measures in reducing the risk of contracting the pathogen while spending time in the public transport networks. This is what we're doing currently, and our preliminary investigation indicates a significant reduction in the possible infection risk by adopting those preventive measures. And I'm happy to elaborate a bit more about those points in the rest part of the webinar, and feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I think this is a feature of the panel that we have, I guess, a private vehicle perspective as well as a public transit or public transport perspective as well, and we need to have that. So, and I know that GVAC's company designs both, so he's in an interesting position. But thank you all for those comments, initial comments, and let's get into it now and have some discussion about some of the key questions that keep coming up. And I think we've all heard a number of discussions on this subject, but I don't think with this kind of mix so much. So I'm looking forward to this. So now I'm just going to direct a question or two to each panelist, and then we'll take the conversations from there. Going to start with Carla Balo, and the quote from Mark Fields, the former Ford CEO, back in April, when he said, "It doesn't make sense for an automaker to be spending at the same pace on the autonomous future when your number one priority is surviving the non-autonomous present." And Carla already mentioned the sales being down and folks going to used cars. So some issues there. Carla, what do you agree with that comment, or what does that thoughts does that bring up as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I guess it's not quite so simple. He made it seem very obvious, but we do know there's limited development dollars. So, all the profits that come from selling the new vehicles are plowing into electrification and plowing into connected and autonomous vehicles. If you look at what's happening on a global level, clearly electrification is required. The standards aren't changing in Europe, the standards aren't changing in China, and they're driving that market demand. The number of electrification or electrified vehicles, not just pure battery electric vehicles, but hybrids included, are extreme. So that part will continue. The connected autonomous part will see some delays. I think we've already seen some announcements that certain aspects will be delayed, certain testing is being delayed. It was already being delayed a little bit because, we came out, we started doing testing, we started running trials, and we started to discover a lot of things, both technical issues as well as public policy issues, legal issues, insurance issues. It's a holistic ecosystem when we talk about connected autonomous vehicles. It's not just technology. So technology came out, it was, the tail wagging the dog, and then the dog woke up. So now we have to look at all of those other elements when you think about that ecosystem. I think we will begin to see, and we've already started to see, a number of automakers starting to join forces to do development. That's even happening in electrification. Ford, VW, GM, Honda. That's not going to stop. Again, development dollars are limited. You have to pick and choose. And you have to determine as a company, what is your secret sauce and what can you co-develop? What will be a commodity for the customer of the future? And GVAC, I'll be interested to hear your view on that. There's a lot of people that are saying electrified vehicles on a platform, it's going to be almost anonymous. The customer isn't going to care what that platform is. Today, typically, they don't really care what engine is in there either. And a lot of times, the car they're buying, it's somebody else's engine. They just know that what the HP is, what the fuel economy is, and most customers are okay with that. So what is your secret sauce that really is going to make customers buy your brand? Those are the things you need to be spending your money on and developing. And what are commodities that you can join forces with others, reduce that development cost, and be able to put out into the market economically. So yes, Mark is partly right. But again, you really need to decide where you're going to put those dollars because they're extremely limited right now. The other piece of the puzzle is we've seen during COVID, delivery vehicles and e-delivery vehicles are really, really playing a key role in delivering products, people, and services. And that is not going to go away most likely. There are still people that are going to be afraid to get out, especially those who have pre-existing conditions, the elderly. And I think smartly, we need to continue to develop those kinds of e-delivery products, and many of those will eventually be autonomous.
So thank you, Carla. I think interesting way you put it, the tail wagged the dog, which is absolutely true. CAV is delayed, and I guess that was inevitable because, as you rightly said, it was something that was kind of struggling anyway. But I think when you say that, and maybe you could comment, I think you're referring to privately owned vehicles mainly, rather than some kind of fleet use of those technologies. Would that be true?
For sure. We basically don't want people to own an autonomous vehicle. First, they can't afford it. And secondly, it's likely to make our congestion in VMT much worse. So when we think about the whole mobility ecosystem and improving our environment, providing safe mobility, it's better for people not to own them. Fleets are the perfect opportunity, and fleets in an urban environment. That's the sweet spot for electrification, the sweet spot to be able to create autonomous zones. And we'll see that within the next 5 years for sure. Unless we have another pandemic or something else happens that really turns everything topsy-turvy. But we expect to be able to see those in the very congested downtown areas. I neglected to mention that we've seen many, many cities now start with their smart streets, actually closing down lanes, putting restaurants there, putting bike lanes. If that stays and doesn't go away, clearly that creates then zones for autonomy as well, and zones for fleets to take over. And it's a whole dynamic that remains to be seen. Is this long lasting, or are we going to start to revert back? And if we apply the same rules that we've always applied to new technology, it will get us nowhere. We have to change the rules and change the game and use the technology.
Thanks, Carla. GVAC, your name came up, and I think Carla's talking quite a bit about the appeal of the product. And you already mentioned the more granular markets and love-hate relationships between the consumer and the product and so on. So do you have any comments on this issue about, you know, how far the OEMs can go with the new technology?
Absolutely. Means first of all, great comments there, Carla. I enjoyed those. There is maybe a different way to look at those things, right? Means no matter what, every OEM since the age of dawn, is creating a package, creating metal and offloading it for a benefit. So I think now will be the time to come back to the table and trying to rearrange the sequencing of what do that end person really want. As Carla said, means most people don't really care about their engine right now. Means it has to be a good stable engine. They know a couple of brands, as long as it's a, let's say, a GM block, or it may be a Ford block, they're pretty good. So those things are given, those are table stakes. Nobody's going to fake anybody on that. But that might not create the complete distinction now. Now understanding what would be the value structure, like it's kind of a mountain. When you go on the top of it, it's going to be your ideal user experience, a kind of an experiential economy, the aspirational, the emotional element. That's what people had to go after always. They never completely took care of it. It was typically more performance oriented, functional oriented, and so much BTU or so much horses, and that's completely okay too. But how you unpack that into the world of attributes? Why do you really want it? I mean, Susan might want to go for a Lamborghini, you might want to go for a Ferrari. Both are amazing cars. It has a different want from it, right? So there would be those niches right now, which were earlier, let's say, with just luxurious premium markets. It's very easy to use that segment as such. But now it will come down to see how you sequence your attributes and then into the, I would say, technological assets, and then goes all back to the materials or something. So how you create those kind of an attribute structure, and how do you understand those, and how do you again put in front of you? And that's the 4 part. We talked about 4 parts of any product system, right? Hardware, software, digital, back curtain, and the service part. Now, how you put the package together with the serviceization part of it. Like, let's say, again, we have to consider this is we are in the pandemic time. So somehow this would be over, hopefully in 3-4 months at least. Before or after, let's say I want to fly and meet you, Peter, right? I have to go to Delta and do my reservation. Then I have to go and do maybe an Uber or go and Hertz. And there are 3 or 4 different systems between you and me. Why can't I just say I want to go and meet Peter and a company? It might be Honda, or it might be Delta, or it might be Uber. Create the entire package from my doorway to your doorway for our evening kind of a dinner over there. How do you create that kind of a seamlessness? That is an extremely ideal example, but there is no way why nobody can own that system, right? You always see this happening somewhere here and there. You are inside an hotel, inside an airport, everything becomes seamless over there. But how do you take care of this? And you will have to be all the clearances and all those things. Those are the part and obstacles over there. But how a company is going to address, including the OEMs, in not just going in a hardware part, but really understanding, okay, I'm going to sell this minivan. Minivan is going to be used, let's say, for a soccer mom or a soccer dad. What are the days that they will be used for, and doing specifically for that, and not watering down to be again an SUV-ish? Or so how to make sure you are true to what you are offering. And that might you have to unpack your brand. I'm not being as there is no hubris here, but some brands might need to understand what they really stand for. If they just stood for a power or impact or let's say style, those days might be going pretty faster. And coming back to saying, okay, this is a utility vehicle, we are proud of it, this is exactly what it does. So how to find your brand promise now, let's say sub brand promise, and then how to be true to it. And that might take a little bit kind of, and I would say guts to come back and say, okay, these are the things we need to do. The basic thing is, Peter, I think that goes to the one-on-one of innovation. We always think of adding things. As we keep on adding, we have to think of what things we take away from it also. A brand cannot be a hodgepodge of all the things together. You are going to be distinct for something. So let's try to repackaging thing. Okay, these are the things we're going to do. Now going forward, we are not going to do those things. And that kind of, and going back to the strategic phase, the innovation strategy. I'm not talking about corporate strategy, innovation strategy of how people are going to use it. It might be some of the brand might come into the world of public transport too. No problem, but how we are aligned with those, the timetables and what needs to be happening over there. There is no reason. Now we saw the world coming together. People are already talking about, always talked about strategic relationships, but now through agencies like CAR or something like that, you can get everybody together. Even you want to have the best, the lobsters that you like from Maine, they can come onto their airplane if you want. So the thing is coming back to make sure you understand the genesis of why people are going and buying your vehicle and what they really use for. Not just A to B. That's not the only definition of transportation. What are the other things you go and add the benefits to your life? So the experience, the benefits, then the attributes, and then all the technological elements. So somehow now, if more than ever, we are trying to look at really the dreams of people, the desires of people, and making sure they get it, and they will pay for it in a very good way. So it means as a design studio, I mean, I know I'm biased, but it's finally there will be no right now brand who would not be looking at innovation from going back to the blueprint as such, or going back to the drawing boards as such. We have to do this, not just we, means everybody is doing that, and the sooner and faster they can settle on something and go out in the market and stake their claim, the future belongs to them. It's there. It's just like the open wild west right now. How do you create those kind of, how do you anticipate? And for that, you need to design the research to understand what are those sentiments in the market, and get it extract out, and being bold enough to say, okay, this is where we want to play and go forward. It's not easy. It cannot happen overnight. A few months, yeah, it can happen. It should happen. There is no other way.
So GVAC, you're sort of talking about service layers for differentiation beyond the product, or do you see those as part of the product? I'm not sure with your company to what extent you get into designing the services as well as the product itself.
I would say it goes hand in hand. Any product, it means vehicles, sometimes people think it's a pretty complex product. It is, so it's difficult to explain, or sometimes it's difficult to explain because we might be working with some of those clients right now. But take place of anything. Let's say we're talking about summertime right now, right? The back door grills are going to be out. They're already out. If you're thinking of a company who's doing a back door grill, you can design it as a product and hand it over to you, and Chen will be flipping burgers and enjoying in the backyard party. But if you think about, I'm going to give a service where start of every summer, you will get a brand new, clean, all the cobwebs are gone, completely filled, fueled grill land into your yard. You have fun for it. We will change the cylinder every month. We'll make sure it's always ready because it will be connected and letting us know what needs to be done. At the end of the season, you don't need to pack for winter. We will take it over to our warehouse and take care of it. Now, then, if that is also a service model, the design of the product has to be done in a different way. It cannot be the same product. You cannot copy paste a product from an end user in charge model versus a service model. So if it is a part of your business model, and it comes back to the functional attributes, emotional attributes, and the corporate, the viable commercial attributes, if it's a part of your commercial business model, I think it's imperative that you work hand in hand with the service right at the genesis element.
All right, yeah, great point. Thank you very much. You're in an interesting area there. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about data, real-time data, in public transport in particular. And we've heard about this for a while now, that it's going to be possible to use real-time data not only to manage the system and give much better information to users, but even to predict what the demand might be in 30 minutes time and things like that. So Chen, I wanted to direct this one to you because you're our data person, right? So there seems to be some sort of transformational opportunity here, and maybe it comes along with other things like CAV and so on. So could you maybe inform us a little bit about how the real-time data, is it ready for prime time, I guess is my question.
Sure, Peter. I'm going to talk about broadly what we do in this data space, as I'm being labeled as the data guy, but I'm sure my colleagues does more data science than I do. But the second thing is I want to draw an experience from one of the on-demand trials we are organizing with our partners. So that has some experience we can customize on what a future CAV organization may look like. So when it comes to the data part, yes, we have in collaboration, working in collaboration with transport agencies and private corporations for a while in ingesting available data sets and deriving insights from the data sets to support operations. So at this moment, we have real-time data feeds on the public transport, that is GTFS, which is widely used for trip planners and also situation awareness. And so that tells you on the supply side, what does the operation look like? But it's only one side of the coins. The other side of the coins is the demand side, as Peter, you were alluding to. And for this end, the contactless access to public transport system these days does provide very accurate and granular data sets on how journeys are being made in at least in the public transport network, but also in some form of private and ride-hailing services. So this tells you at different times of the day, what does the demand look like? But it's not actually the true picture, because a journey may involve different segments, and you need to join different segments to reveal the actual journey. So that's part of the work. What we do, we have fragmented demand data from various modes of transport across various different times and locations. How do you join those segments to form the actual origin destination of a journey? So we have seen that is happening, and we have seen applications to use the demand data in conjunction with the supply data to optimize your fleet's assignments and composition. So that can be tuned to best meet the demand at times of the day, and also strategically position the vehicle of the servicing fleet in anticipation of such demand. The other aspect is on the control side. So the operation run, no matter is for broader public transport or it's for ride-hailing or private operations, you want to know, you want to get the situation of the operation, and then adjust your operation in real time, depending on the data we have received, and also the prediction of what the demand may look like and what the supply may look like, especially when there is incident or when there is an anomaly in the network. Can we adjust the service in a fashion that is timely enough and also responsive enough to meet those changes in the operation conditions? So we have seen that all happening, and the ability to harness the data, integrated data, so different formats of data can be massaged together to form a single reference frame about what the transport networks looks like, what the operation looks like, is important to support the future, the current and the future form of transport operations. So we have been doing this with a on-demand public transport trial in the north part of Sydney. So we have seen the ability to use advanced data platform and analytics can really sprint up the operations. So we're doing this in conjunction with a Australian operator, but also an American company who provides the data platform. So with a very few number of vehicles, we are able to carry a large number of travelers and fully utilize the capacity of the vehicle fleet to organize on demand, so we can pick up the travelers from their home address with their pre-ordered bookings, and then drop them off in a selected number of public transport hubs. And we can also pack travelers together to form ride-hailing and ride-sharing, and vice versa. We can deliver travelers from the transit hubs to their home address, and so on. And this has been proved to be one of the most successful on-demand trials in Sydney, and it has cast the light on one of the viable options may look like for transforming the public transport services. Yeah, so that's my comments on the data side. There are still some barriers we need to go through. One of them is connectivity. In the near future, hopefully, we have a large number of connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles. We need a secure, low latency and high bandwidth communication network. So we're talking about 5G, and so that's how we can sustain the deployments of a large number of connected and autonomous vehicles. And it's also the critical infrastructure to make sure the demand and supply side can be joined together in real time. We're also having barriers on the privacy part. So one of the solution, at least being trialed in Data 61, is looking at providing protection for privacy while allowing other party to access your personal your data. So you can actually enjoy access to services without excessively losing your privacy. So that's what we call it, confidential analytics. There are a few other researchers of similar magnitudes across the world. That's something we're looking at this moment. All right, Jen?
Thanks, Jen. Thank you very much. So you talked about two aspects there. If you put those together, if you put the real-time data and the optimization, the hubs and so on together, high utilization, and you put that together with the connectivity, obviously you get an even bigger benefit. Are you able to indicate the size of that? And I guess what I'm looking for is whether this rises to one of the top level innovations, like automation would be one, connectivity, shared mobility. There's a few things that we've all signed on to recently. So does the real-time data aspect rise to that level?
Yeah. So Peter, are you asking about the real-time data? Is that real-time data would meet those requirements or anticipations?
Or what's the real secret sauce here? Is it the real-time data or some other aspect of this?
I think it's both. Real-time data is definitely the key. It's like we call it the data now, the new black gold. So we need those data, especially comes at low latencies, and also at a very granular levels, and revealing how journeys are being made. Then it's about what do you do with the data? We call it the new refineries. So how do you refine those data to derive that insights that you can, it's actionable insights, you can use it to support operations. So basically we're talking about two paradigms. One is how to get the data itself. Then the other one is how to make sense of the data. I believe there are ecosystems already growing up on these two ends. So yes, both of them are needed to sustain and to support what is a new operational model.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So you prompted a question from our audience, so I'd just like to pass that on through. Why 5G? Why do we need 5G? Are there other alternatives there?
Good. So first, I'm not a telecommunication specialist, but I have a higher understanding of 5G. So one of the key selling points for 5G is low latency and the large number of connections. And this is exactly what we need to do for the CAVs, because imagine 30% of fleets on the road is broadly CAV type. Then we have millions of cars in the road networks. They need to communicate with each other and also to the infrastructure in real time with a large quantity of data. And the current 4G network is not equipped to designed to harness and also to support this kind of connectivity. That's why we, at least from this point of view, we need 5G to support this kind of a new future. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we need.
I guess you're saying performance attributes certainly fit, and there may be other means as well. I don't want to get too much into the spectrum kind of issues today. As you say, it gets very technical. It also gets pretty political. So interesting subject for another day, I think. So thanks, Chen. Let's move to a question just initially directed to GVAC, and that is about public transit. And you're in a kind of unique position here because you're designing systems for both personal and public transport. And it appears already come up in the conversation that there may be a reluctance, there may be a huge reluctance to come back to public transport with crowded vehicles, trains, trams, streetcars, I should say, buses, and so on. So given that situation, what's likely to happen, and what will happen as we recover from the virus, and what will happen with the recovery so that commuters will be willing to take public transit to work and so on?
Yeah, first of all, not just because we all have nations have invested a lot into the infrastructure of public transit, not just because of that, but it was invested there for many reasons. And yes, the pandemic is a pretty big black swan thing. Hopefully pretty soon it goes. So there might be, the answer can be a different one for this next, whatever, smaller time versus, let's say, the post-pandemic times. I think let's try to answer it from post-pandemic times. Right now it is still a flux, and there are still plenty of, I would say, different variables in the air, right? Means no matter about every government, at least over here, is still urging people try to work from home as much as they can, if you can. So there are telecommunications and teleshopping and all those other variables are in the market, which are going to stay or going to go up also. But coming back to the elements of why it has always been strong, those still overrule and over dominate all the other elements that the nodal or normal everyday, I would say, commuting is going to offer. Now then, how to think about changes would be there? I would say it has to be there. It might not eventually come out into completely stripping of the cars and rechanging the entire platforms as such, or entire, let's say, the flowage as such. There might be plenty of innovations coming on the stations as such, which is still static. They are not, let's say, in the dynamic world as such. We can still try to think about, simple adjustment. When I say simple, again, it's all relative. But if in some countries, it might not be possible. We cannot talk about going with the super dense load that is in the transit system for a city like Mumbai in India. That's completely different kind of an big, hairy, audacious problem as such. But elements like adding more cars, adding more, I would say, this might sound like segregation, but trying to see right now means when people went for shopping for groceries, there were different timelines for, let's say, pre-existing medical conditions people versus older people or younger. It was there. Nobody said like, why are you segregating this? But no, it was there and made for a reason. So already independently, our train cars, they are distinct. We can try to think about how to make sure people understand which way to go, whom to go with. There can be those kind of and systemic things can be done, but more changes might come on the stations. I'm not trying to propose new waiting times to go to a station and go through the entire protocol of getting sanitized. But it's, do I have an answer right now of how we're going to solve it? No, but mitigate. It will be, let's say, solved from all these different kind of approaches to how you go there, what you do, what are the protocols, and again come back main to the awareness of the public of what you should do when you're feeling something versus something else. So it's about the solidarity and the trust in the system of how they're going to rectify this and how they're going to make sure enforce those things also. Right now, it's sad. You can see a big sign outside. I'm not going to say the name of a store, but let's say a big box retailer right now that masks are needed. Nobody wears a mask. So especially comes down to the super dense load. If it is an, let's say, a packed kind of a car where it's closed doors, then everybody who chooses to be there then have to choose to play the rule. So somehow then it becomes the problems, again, more political, I would say, of enforcement. But there are things that can work in theory right now too, but all depends on how and which city wants to go and approach them and experiment them out.
So Deepak, how differently do you think you're going to be designing these public transit vehicles in the future because of this crowding issue? Is it going to have a long-term impact? Do you have ideas as to how that might change?
Yeah, means the initial first things means we cannot go into details, but like it's going to be in a way a similar system. I'm not saying copy paste, like what we do in the aviation world. In the aviation world, when you are, let's say, an airline company, you just order a Boeing plane, and then the end company, Cathay Pacific, or it might be Emirates, they will define what's the spacing in between the seats. So it will be a platform rail system like the airline systems, and you define you want to have so much knee space or not. In the same way, coming back to, let's say, our world of transit, it's never going to be now completely, let's say, bolted to the floors. There would be a platformic kind of a level, and then depending upon the city, is going to be Sacramento or it's going to be Mexico City. Then you might think about still try to change the barriers as such. How you see staggered sitting, you can always, if you sneeze in this direction or this direction, there's so many different elements to consider with. So those things will be considered a lot, but there's many different mechanical ways to take care of that, but it can only be delivered to such a level. It cannot go beyond certain other city loads where frankly, right now, there is no viable solution. We can always theorize something, but super dense loads of some cities across the world, it's painful to see how we can create any elements of social distancing. So we cannot just say, hey, we have answers for everything for that. I think nobody has an answer. And it's a grave problem there.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think it's got to be P3 more than ever. So, another way to help is to adjust work hours, so that you don't have that density at the very specific times. So working together between the transit companies and the private sector, I think more than ever, we need to think about that. And then you have to change your whole mind about what is a design on a bus. We can think of many, many different things. Get a 3-year-old, they'll give you 100 ideas. We can have cones come down over people's heads to disinfect. They'll come up with 100 things. So really, we have to think about what is different. Contactless is necessary, contactless payment. Nobody should be able to touch everything. The driver has to feel completely safe. So that's that integration of data into this whole scheme of things to make it that seamless experience. So think differently.
Carla, you're talking about investment there, and I think that's where we came into this particular conversation about a big sunk investment there already. So we're going to double down on that or not?
Well, I've heard a lot of different things. When we talk about, let's just focus on bus transit for a moment. Probably 3/4 of the time, the buses are empty in a lot of municipalities, or just 1 or 2 people. So why do we need that big, huge bus going around on a prescribed route? If we use data, we can do on demand, send the right size, send the right propulsed vehicle to be able to get people where they need to be and do it much more efficiently than the way we're doing things today. So data is going to help us a lot in the right analysis of that data.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the data needs to rise to the very top of this discussion. So we've got about 5 minutes to go, and I just want to leave a couple of minutes at the end. So I've got one question here, and I think in general today we've heard a lot of issues and a lot of care and consideration going into a lot of things to recover from the pandemic and what's going to happen with mobility. And in a sense, a lot of this is piling on more requirements, more issues that need to be dealt with. But at the same time, is there something truly new that's emerging that to do with healthy workforces, social equity? Is there something that's coming through from this riveting experience that we've all had that is going to stay with us, particularly on a positive note? So I throw that out to all the panelists, and please jump in.
I'll start if you don't mind, team. I think one of the positive elements is really mobility provides opportunity, and opportunity needs to be for all. And that means regardless of your economic class, regardless of gender, regardless of everything, racial inequality fits in here as well. We need to find solutions that suits everybody's lifestyle and everybody's needs. If we don't provide mobility, people will be forced in situations where they lack education, they lack opportunities for healthcare, and all of those things have bubbled up in this pandemic. We've seen, you know, people with lack of healthcare, that's where, you know, some of the spikes have been. We have to stop that, and mobility is a way to do that. And we've seen it through some of the services that have started, and we need to continue to improve based on the things that have worked so well, and always keep that in our minds about the equality that's required and the ladders of opportunity that mobility provides.
Thanks, Carla.
I want to double down what Carla is saying about the social equality. From what an early study indicates, for example, in the UK, half of the higher income groups cohort can work from home without too much trouble. However, only less than 10% of those lowest income group can stay work at home without losing their job access. And the only viable way for many of these lower income groups is via public transport. So making public transport viable and also clean, safe to travel is important for create that social equality. That's the social aspect of it. The other thing is the good part when it comes out of this pandemic, I believe, is this acute awareness for personal hygiene and also social distancing. I think that's gonna linger a bit longer than than we anticipated.
That's very interesting.
Thanks, Ken. Vivek, what about you?
Yeah, so two things. Personally, means it helped me contemplate a lot. You cannot help but peer out of their window and try to understand what is essential and what is not as unessential, right? In the first few months, it literally told us that we were doing only the essential parts of economy and buying only those things, and the entire economy is collapsed. So it literally tells us, when I say us, means not just designers, but the entire species of Homo sapiens, about what we are doing, why we are sometimes just running endlessly, creating all those things. I mean, I'm not against making money. I mean, everybody wants it for a very good purpose. But are we overdoing in some areas or not, or over exploiting one region or chemicals or something like that? So that really helped me understand, or still helping me understand, how to do that. The other part from the pandemic and for let's say the societal perspective is, yeah, mobility is needed. But one more thing, we came to know that suddenly communities wherever you live, they are suddenly coming together. We are looking out for each other really more. And so we look out for the neighbors, look out for the neighboring kind of, and your small downtown, not the big downtown as such. So somehow people understand how we are really now dependent on a completely different net. But how can we start our next businesses trying to be serving our small local economy too? So yeah, mobility is needed. Absolutely, I'm not discounting that, but trying to add to things like now, suddenly people everywhere would be patriotic, about more proud of their own country, their own nation, their own county, their own city, and trying to see, I'm going to make a pizza place over here, going to start a new pizza place. I will try to source more locally grown vegetables when I can in Michigan, versus trying to go all around the world for the lowest bid. So somehow you can see the small kind of an prideness of working with each other and trying to help each other. There would be always an price cost elasticity also, but that kind of a good thing happening to, I'm not saying we have to keep local. We cannot be local. We are highly interconnected to keep it local, and it's not good for innovation. But no matter what, it's going to be, I'm going to see people are going to help out each other in the local economy, and then this last mile, 20-mile delivery robots or 20-mile kind of an elements, even if they are not buying a big 3,000-pound vehicle, might be sustainable in certain city pockets. So there might be completely newer rise of a different kind of a city as we know it, or a town, or in county as we know it. So it's only time will tell. At that time will be pretty fast.
Thanks, Vivek and panel. I think that's a great note to end the panel discussion. We're not short of ideas here, that's for sure. I wrote down new mobility solutions must bring social equality, and I think we'll be struggling to introduce anything that doesn't meet that test. I think we agreed on that. That's a great message. Want to thank the panelists. I want to thank Carla, GVAC, and Chen up in Sydney. Thanks so much for turning your minds to this issue. I think great perspectives. Thank you very much. You all behaved yourselves very nicely, kept within the time. Very good. I want to thank Stacey Ryan from ITS Australia, sitting over here very patiently, been running things flawlessly, I might say. I do want to recognise all of the MAX partners, in addition to the university and ITS Australia you heard about. Obviously, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, represented by Susan on the line here, Austroads, and the Australian Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Cities and Regional Development. I just want to mention that the next MAX session will be on July 13 in the US, July 14 here in Australia. It'll be on infrastructure readiness for automated vehicles. So we'll be sending out information about that, and we hope you can join us on July 13, excuse me, and 14. So with that, I wish our friends in Michigan a wonderful evening. And we've still got a whole day to enjoy here in Melbourne. So with that, I'll thank everybody and sign out, and thank you, audience, as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye now.
Have a good day.